Amagon, the most decorated Marine, was assigned a mission by his commander to investigate a strange, monster-infested South Pacific island from which no man has ever returned alive. Welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Sam.
Sam, speaking of Sam, this game was made by the Sammy USA Corporation. Never heard of them, but what are your initial thoughts on Sammy?
It's American Sammy.
I mean, just off the bat, it sounds like a very nice and well-respected organization. Prestigious, probably like big muscles too, and probably has like a good sense of humor and nice wit.
Sean,
you Sammy? Should we call you Sammy going forward?
I have nothing to do with that. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm just asking if we should call you Sammy. I mean, you're Sam. You seem to like the name Sammy.
You can call me American Sammy.
Okay,
cool. Anybody get a chance to look at the box art for this game?
Yes.
It's crazy. It's wild. It's probably one of the best box arts we've seen. And not in like that funny, like Mega Man is so goofy box art. This one, I don't know. I feel like, there's something about this little kid who's apparently supposed to be a most decorated Marine who then like transforms into a macho version of himself. But then he's like firing at like dinosaurs and UFOs and then like bumblebees and bats. So like there's just a lot going on this box art, and I think it's very abstract, and I don't know if I'd know what kind of game I was getting into off of this.
Yeah, I kind of get some vibes that maybe this game, the story of this game was like changed in development. Like I feel like they made a game with one story and then they're like, let's just make the story something else and not change it to the
100% was.
Was it?
Yeah, I think the Japanese name of this game is like something Macho Man, and then you just apparently turn into Macho Man. It has nothing to do with the Marines or like, the United States government sending just that one Marine to the monster world. It's something else. So yeah, it's definitely got that. What was the other game we played that was like the biggest? Like the manga with the dog, but it's not really a dog.
And no, you're thinking of the one with the ghost.
The ghost. Sure.
Chubby Cherub, right?
Chubby Cherub, sure. So I think it's sort of like that.
Yeah, when I was reading the manual, and I was like, all right, they're talking about like the greatest Marine in U.S. history, right? Greatest Marine or soldier, I forget what they call him. And then the game boots up, and it's just like this little tiny guy in a pink jumpsuit with like a stupid expression on his face. And I'm like, all right.
Terrible.
Yeah, it does not scream decorated Marine.
Yeah.
I thought he was supposed to be like a caveman or something.
Yeah, it looks like they gave a Flintstones character a gun.
Especially when you transform, you look even more like a caveman.
It's got that big lower jaw. I guess all jaws are lower.
Yeah, it's very like, I don't know, like Neanderthal. But also point out that when you run out of ammo with your gun, you hold it over your head in a way that you wouldn't hold it. You hold it what looks like what I think you would hold like a caveman club.
Yeah.
So like I really thought that this was like, it was just like a reskinned caveman that was barely even reskinned.
Yeah, I think that's about right. And I know this isn't something that I should be thinking, but I was just cringing every time because I got to that point where I ran out of ammo. We're going to get into this, but I got to the point where I was swinging the gun like a club pretty often, and I just felt bad because I feel like you're just breaking the gun. Like, what? You're going to break it,
right? I mean, I guess you got to survive. You got to defend yourself. You got bullets.
You could like pick up one of the other guys that you beat and then use that.
That's true.
Because in a way, this is kind of how they would have made Castaway, the film with Tom Hanks. This is how they would have made that into a video game. It would have been like this.
Is there an NES Castaway?
Castaway came out in 2000, I think, with Robert Zemeckis directing.
Yeah, it was based on the NES game that came out in 1989.
True. The movie got rid of the elephants that walked on their hind legs and shot out eggs.
So players take the role of Amagon, the Marine, which is also just a weird name for a person, but let's just say that makes sense, right? He's trapped on this island after a plane crash. Now he has to get to his rescue ship, which is all the way on the other side of the island. So the only way to do it is to cross on foot. So you're looking at an action platformer, run from left to right. You clear your way through all these enemies until you get to the boss at the end of each stage. Very, very straightforward. Except for it's like if Mario had a gun, right? Because there's your gun that you use to shoot. Honestly, some really cute looking enemies. I wasn't expecting. I thought they could, for a game with a gun, you would expect the enemies to look a little more vicious. But it's like nice little, I'm sure it gets a little bit worse later on, but like nice little purple spiders and some birds and stuff like that. I don't even know if all these enemies are necessarily trying to get in your way or if they just exist on the island and you're just torturing them. But Joe, take me through why this is different than your normal action platformer. What makes Amagon stand out just on like a initial impression?
Well, all right. So what you were saying is a big part of it. That it looks a little brighter. It looks a little more Mario-like. I think just because the color palette is like more simple, and that makes it look a little cleaner. But as far as like gameplay elements, the major kind of gimmick here is that you can collect a power-up that allows you to transform from Amagon into Megagon, which is funny because that means nothing to anyone. But once you kind of get the hang of it, you realize that Megagon is just a jacked, more powerful version of Amagon that looks like a caveman and has an actual health bar and has more powerful attacks. And basically, you're just like more of a juggernaut version of your original self. So like that's I think supposed to be the hook is that like you need to struggle through the jungle as Amagon to get to the more difficult parts and have gained the ability to transform into Megagon.
I like that struggle in the jungle.
I love that, and as Sean mentioned, in the Japanese version, the story's a little different. So Megagon, which again doesn't mean anything, actually sounds like a Power Ranger, like one of those things they would call on, right?
Or like a shape with a lot of sides.
It's just that Amagon sounds too like it should be like Steve turns into Megagon, not like. Or like Steve turns into Amagon. Like they both sound like the thing you would turn into, like the powerful thing.
Right. So in the Japanese version, the main character is a scientist named Jackson who transforms into Macho Max by using a special drug.
I could have sworn it was Macho Man.
No, I think it's he transforms into a Macho Man-like character known as Macho Max, or the drug is named Macho Max, which makes sense because you're maximum macho.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah. So before we talk about like that whole mechanic of becoming Megagon or Macho Max or Macho Man or the Incredible Hulk, whatever you think it is, before we talk about that, can we just talk about when you're playing as Amagon with the rifle and the combat with the enemies? What's the flow of that like, Sam?
It's hard. It's really hard. Because you get hit once, you're dead. You can run out of ammo, and then you have to be right up next to an enemy to hit them. And some of these enemies, like the standing ones, require, I think, 12 or 16 hits before they're done. And it's like they have predictable moving patterns, I think. But it's still like each enemy kind of responds when you get to a certain point near them. Like if you get underneath those guys who are on the tree, then they drop down in front of you and then go to the left. But sometimes that trigger point doesn't happen until you're a little bit past them. So even though they respond the same way, and you can predict what the enemies are going to do, they're placed in a way, and there's these little changes that make it that still make it unpredictable if you're not playing it hundreds of times. Which this seems like that kind of game that you would just play over and over and over again until you memorized it. And I think that's really the only way to get through levels.
So, Sam, what's the issue there, though? Is it the enemy behavior, or is it Amagon and the way that he, like, his gun handles combat, or is it both?
I think it's more just, it feels like an onslaught sometimes, and it's a little bit hard to. I would say it's kind of enemy behavior, where like you'll try to jump over one guy, but at the second you jump, they'll jump, things like that, and that happens frequently.
Yeah, between that and the fact that there are so many of them, and so many of them of different kinds that have different patterns, and like they don't seem to respond to the terrain. They can just sort of like a walking enemy won't get stuck if there's like a ledge like it would when you're sort of trained in Super Mario to expect that. It'll just sort of teleport to the top of the ledge and continue to follow you. There's a lot of things that are sort of, you have to unlearn from a lot of different action platformers to kind of get the hang of this.
Yeah.
I will say, I think that I feel like this game is like a step in the right direction compared to a lot of other games when it comes to enemy placement, where like at least they clearly like are, the enemy placement is not random. Like it seems like they had some thought into like where and when they come. The problem is that they just still made it too much of a cluster, so it doesn't really matter that they put thought into it because like they didn't think about should this enemy be here. But you know what I mean? It's not like any enemy just shows up at any time and they're just always running at you. Like you can tell that there's a part where you come where the crocodiles come.
Yeah. They do still do the thing where, like, if you're just standing still, they'll just keep coming. So you can get trapped. And it does seem like, and I agree that there does seem to be more thought in the enemy placement, but I think that there's more, like, trolling going on here where it knows that the player sort of sees the optimal route and, like, is going to dodge this thing, so they place another thing that's going to spawn in as soon as they get there, and I don't appreciate that when it's this dense.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that is a big negative, that like enemies will just keep coming even after you kill them until you've moved on. But I think that it would be manageable if you were like Thanos these enemies and literally just cut them out in half. You'd be able to at least manage it, and it wouldn't be as bad as like what was it, like Karate Kid, I think was a big offender of that.
Yeah, there's something about the pacing of the game because of the way that the enemies behave. I think, Sam, you were talking about a lot of the game just comes down to enemy behavior, but because of how you have to handle them, and you play this game of like chicken with some of them, where it's like, okay, wait, are they going to jump that new height, or are they going to jump their highest height, like, or are they going to come at me? It slows down the game a lot, and your gun is like, I don't know, it's great that you have some kind of ranged weapon, but it feels like you're playing Contra, but like with a wimp who can barely do anything. Like the action element of this game is putting it like, that's very kind to the game, because it's not really an action like game. You don't feel like a badass with a gun tracking down like through the jungle. Like you kind of have to, because everything is one hit, you gotta play the game slow if you want to get anywhere. Was that your guys' experience?
Definitely. But I thought that was what they were going for. I mean, I don't think that they pulled it off in a way that was particularly fun, but I thought that the point was that you are very weak as Amagon, so then you can feel very powerful. And I think they went too far in both directions. When you're powerful, I think you're too powerful, and when you're weak, I think you're too weak.
I think that part of it is memorization also. I think that does play a big part, where like if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to go slow and be careful. But once you do know how to take care of enemies, I think that you can do a little faster. Like there are some enemies that you can just skip, like the tall enemies, because a lot of them jump. And so when they jump, if you can get underneath them, then you don't even have to fight them. But the trade-off there is also that a lot of those big enemies have the Megagon power-up in them when you defeat them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sam. I think, ultimately, the biggest problem I have with just the level design is that because of how challenging they've made, some of the enemies and the cluster of enemies, that the pacing just it feels off here. Like, either the levels are too long and they should have shortened them, or the enemies should have been more spread out so that you have time to deal with them appropriately. It feels like somewhere along the line they took a misstep in both of those directions, where the level is just too long and there's just too many enemies. So it's very hard, in a one-hit KO game, it's very hard to get very far in this game. Now, challenging things is not something that we're not used to, but I like when a game is challenging for other reasons, not because, I'm supposed to be slogging it out and memorizing and trying to dodge things rather than take them on. It feels it's at odds with itself. Yeah,
I also don't really like the idea of memorization being the like that's the primary source of challenge. That seems kind of like a cop out to me. Not that anyone is saying that that's where they get enjoyment from any particular game, but that's just my opinion on that.
To me, this feels like the prime example of like an old Nintendo hard kind of feel, where it's like a little bit in the gameplay itself and a little bit in like the kind of janky old school construction of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because like the game has a reputation for being incredibly difficult, and I'm not saying it's not, but I also feel like even in the like only 170 other games we've played, we've definitely played stuff harder than this.
This one has elements that are definitely hard because I think it's a little unfair. Like so there are those upright, you alluded to them earlier, Sam, there are those upright enemies, sometimes they're elephants, or in some levels they're crocodiles or robots or whatever, and those take, most things in this game take either 1 hit or 16 hits to kill, which is just kind of a ridiculous like disparity there. And the 16 hit thing, sometimes 2 of them appear on the screen, and I found that if 2 of them are on the screen, in my experience,
you're gonna die. Yeah,
like you're dead until you try like the 5th or 6th time you get there, and you could finally maybe like luck your way through.
Yeah, but you have to like cheese those guys.
Yeah, like try and get them off. How do you cheese them? What, like get them off the screen, or
a lot of them jump, so you can predict when they jump, or if you jump, they'll jump. So you have to like get around them without killing them.
Gotcha. Yeah, get under them or get over them.
Yeah, that's what I felt anyway.
Which is an interesting idea, right, for an enemy, no doubt. It's just that it happens too often to make it worth it. It seems like you should reserve that, so this way it's like a teachable moment, not just like this is a part of our design. Like, it's a teachable moment in the game, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. The game should work with you here rather than fight you further the further along in the game you go.
No, I just like that because I'm thinking of like a morality thing when you say that. But, yeah, I get
right. You don't have to kill them. All right, let's talk about Megagon, which is the, maxed out Macho Man form of Amagon, this is pretty cool. It takes the RPG side of like experience points and mixes it with the arcade element of a score. And I can't think of an earlier instance of this, but it'd be like if you got a certain score in Pac-Man, after like a certain amount of dots being eaten, and all of a sudden you just became like twice Pac-Man's size and you could chew through the walls or something. Like, it is a neat idea to tie the amount of experience points you get in the game just to the arcade score.
No, that's what I really liked about this, is that every 5,000 points, I think.
Yes, 5,000
is like a little tick of the box of Megagon's health, or a use of his actual superpower, I guess, which is a beam of energy coming out of his chest while he flexes. And I mean, we have been complaining about the uselessness of scores in any kind of game for over 2 years now. I don't know how long we've been doing this, but I was just amazed that we finally found like an application that seemed so intuitive. So I was a big fan of the way that they did this Megagon thing. I just wish it, for me, Megagon had like that, I don't know if there's like a name for this, but like that syndrome where like you don't want to use a very special power until like you know that you really need it. So I was always sort of I was always trying not to use Megagon. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
You can use it more than once though.
You have to get a drop. Yeah.
But can you? Here's my question for you guys. I wasn't sure about this. Well, first of all, do the drops are random, right? The drops are not tied to points.
Random.
Okay. Then second of all, that's what I thought. Second of all, if you pick up 2 drops, does it save the other one? Can
No.
you become Megagon? Okay, that's what I wasn't sure about, because once I get a second one, I'm like, well, that's kind of pointless at that point. I never tested it out, but yeah, I do love that it gives you a reason to kill enemies and a reason to do, to participate in the main gameplay loop of attacking things, because that gives you health as Megagon.
Yeah.
So Megagon cannot use the machine gun anymore. His hands are, I guess, too big for it. So instead he has a punch, which does 8 times the damage and obviously never runs out of ammo like the gun. However, you've now completely lost your ranged weapon and you must fight in closed combat. Did we prefer closed combat over the rifle, or was it kind of like, this is strange now. I was doing better when I was able to tackle enemies from afar.
Well, you still have a ranged weapon. It just also uses some of your health.
Yeah, it's like a trade-off though, right? So it's
Right.
like, forget that for a second. Just talking about like now your primary combat is the fist. Like, is that like somehow too harsh of a trade-off for Megagon? And now it's kind of like, oh, I wish I had the rifle.
Like I think it is a fair trade-off, because I think that a lot of the enemies are weak to attacks from underneath them. Your punch works like an uppercut, and it gets things slightly above you too. So what was once your own weakness, like attacks from above, is now your advantage. And so now you have a hitbox there, or a hurtbox. I always mix them up. But so I think you gain this whole other like dimension of available places to fight.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
with that.
I wanted to say off the bat that I always 100% prefer to be Megagon. But when I'm thinking about that, I mean, the reason that I prefer to be Megagon is because he's so much more powerful, and because like you can easily beat all the bosses as Megagon and like waves of enemies. But if I'm thinking about it, I mean, I didn't really run into this because I, like you, Sean, didn't use Megagon when I didn't need to, just to kind of save it. But if I was using him the whole time, I mean, those close quarters attacks plus the ranged attacks taking down your health just means you're losing a lot of health between the two of those. So like, it probably is like responsible to be Amagon until you absolutely need to. So like, for what it's worth, I think they did a good balancing act between those two, I suppose.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think that like I think it would be just too crazy if he also had the machine gun and could do closed combat. So I do think it's a fair trade-off, as Sean was alluding to, that like you still have your ranged weapon, it just comes at a cost now. I think that's the best way to handle things, but it's like at the cost of 1 hit point. Now you can fire those waves of energy from your chest, and they do 16 times the damage, which is great because, again, we were talking earlier, like the rifle sometimes takes 16 shots to kill some stuff.
Yeah.
But it can also hit multiple enemies in a single blast, which is nice too. Reminds me of some shmup power-ups there.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So, Joe, you were talking about you prefer Megagon, and then, your reasoning for that and everything like that. But do you think, just on a level progression scale, were they giving you the Megagon ability often enough to make the game interesting? Like, I would say that if I was just Amagon, if there was no Megagon component to this game, I wouldn't care for it at all. Like, the Megagon component is what makes the game. So did they give it to you enough to keep you intrigued?
I think it was often enough for like I said already, the way I was playing it. Like, maybe that's not the way that they intended you to play it. The way I was playing it was get to the end of the level, then use Megagon. So I was always like looking out the whole time. I did not want to get to the end of the level without a power-up, without whatever, the drop that you need to pick up in order to transform. Because that happened to me on like my first few tries, and that made the game, I think, I could be wrong, but I think literally impossible. I don't think you can beat the bosses as Amagon.
You technically can.
Okay. Well, I can't. It's literally impossible for me.
Yeah, through some questionable ways of beating bosses, like, with the lion head smacking him with the butt of my rifle. I was able to beat him that way, but it took a very long time, and I was kind of cheating. So it's technically possible.
I guess, yeah. So I guess after the first boss, I never even tried to fight with Amagon, because the first boss just runs at you, and I just fire as many bullets at it as I can and stay as far away from it, and it just doesn't kill it. Yeah. But then I do think, I'm talking about how much I like playing as Megagon. I do think that, like, I like playing as Megagon because it gets me through the things. I don't think it's, like, more fun. I just think it's really, really easy. Like, it would have been cool if the balance was there a little more as far as, like, gameplay difficulty balance. Because that first boss, either literally, to me, impossible to beat with Amagon, or, like, almost impossible to lose with Megagon. Like, it was like 2 hits with that blast, and the boss is done. And I found that with most of the bosses with Megagon. So it was nice, and there was, like, a satisfaction to, like, being that powerful, but then it also robbed it of all challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Joe, is, like, with the bosses, it shouldn't be impossible to beat these guys with Amagon. And by impossible, I mean, like, it shouldn't be a slog. Because you didn't design your game with the idea that you would become Megagon every time at the end of the stages, or else that would just be something that happens via a cutscene or something. You watch him take the pill or whatever it is, and then he becomes Megagon, and now you deal with the Megagon portion of the stage level. So because they didn't design it that way, it's kind of unfair for the way that they built out the bosses. And I also just found these boss fights not to be interesting at all either. They were more just, stronger enemies that didn't really do anything.
They just run at you. Well, the first one just runs at you. Yeah.
So it's like, there's something about that. I would have expected, like, a cool, some of the enemies have cool patterns, so I would have expected some cool ideas for larger enemies in this game, but the bosses are just that. They're just larger.
I'm going to start sounding like a broken record here, but I did think that some of them had interesting patterns. But it didn't matter because it was way too easy to kill them. It's like a lot of things that I think this game did well are just kind of ruined because of that weird difficulty imbalance. So, like, for example, there's, like, the lion head has, like, an interesting pattern. I don't know if it's necessarily great boss design, but I thought it was interesting. There's also that, like, snake at the end where you have to take out the bottom layers of the snake so you can reach the horn. That's kind of interesting, except taking out the bottom layers of the snake is just hitting A 3 times, and then hit A one more time and hit the horn. It's like literally rapid fire kill of the boss. So it's like they went through the trouble of designing an interesting boss, but then never really made the gameplay work with it.
Yeah, I hear you there completely. I'm not sure what they would have. Like, they would have had to change something about the way Amagon plays to make it more interesting, right? Because the solution certainly isn't just to bring down their total number of hits or something. So maybe I'm not quite sure what the solution is there. Sam, you have something?
Yeah, I'm saying maybe, like, decrease his power. Like, instead of, he does 8, right, for every 1 that Amagon does. So maybe make him do 4 instead.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, or something, like, make it so it's not so easy to hit your target every time. You know what I mean? Like, make it so it's like you have to wait for your opening, or you have to get to it or something. If it's just hit the target and the target's right in front of you, and you can just turbo fire the thing as long as you have enough.
Because I think also, like, the fact that you have a life bar now instead of 1 hit KO is already super powered. Like that's enough to justify turning into a new guy, I think, to me. Like, yeah, I think that he also needs to be stronger. So I think even if it was just, like, each hit is, like, 2 hits, like, not even, like, 4 times. Because, like, the most difficult part of this game is just the fact that, like, there's so many enemies, and you can't even get hit once as the base Amagon. So I think that would kind of solve that at least the too easy portion of this problem. I don't know how you fix the too hard portion of Amagon, aside from maybe at least giving him a bit more ammo. I don't know.
But his ammo's gone.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh. That's fun.
Yeah, I tried. They're not all funny.
Why is all the music in this game so high pitched?
I don't know. I like the music.
Yeah, I didn't even notice.
I didn't like it. There's something about it. It was just like, the tones that they used, unpleasant to my ears.
I really liked the Megagon music. The Amagon music I've completely forgotten about. But when you transform, it just pumps you up a little bit.
I like how each level has its own music, though.
Yeah, that is cool. Nice coming off of Lolo.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to hear something else about Amagon, though, look no further than Amagon, Arkansas. It's a small little town in Jackson County, which is weird because Jackson County would be a reference to, in the Japanese game, the scientist Jackson. So in the American version, right, his name is Amagon, but in the Japanese version, he's a scientist named Jackson. Game takes place in Amagon, Arkansas, Jackson County. Who can say? Only 98 people living in Amagon, Arkansas, which if you flip it is 89, which is 1989, the current year that we're in our nostalgia journey. So there's just a lot going on here.
It makes sense that there's only 98 people living there because it's like so dangerous because you get hit with one thing and you die.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's an anagram for Abraham Lincoln.
Ah.
It's the birthplace of former Arkansas Governor Mike Beebe.
Gotta love Beebe.
Of course. Yeah.
Yep. So that's the sequels and spinoff section. So one more big thing we got to do, and that is to decide whether Amagon is an essential game on a little thing we call the Essential Games List. Sam?
Hey.
It's all about Amagon, not Megagon. So when you are giving this game your Essential Games List vote, how do you feel about the NES video game Amagon?
Amagon, the American Sammy video game. Wow, what a game. I think this game has so much that's working for it. I think that visually it looks great. I think all the enemy designs are really fun. I think that the core gameplay loop for it is also really fantastic. The fact that you have to get points in this game, like we were talking about. Points are essential. You're weak and then you become strong, but the strong Megagon has a limit with like the beam, which is his strongest attack, which makes him weaker. I think that there's all these really great kind of gameplay loops that are all happening at the same time. And I think that if you are the kind of person who likes a challenging retro action platformer, then that the one that you can really invest yourself in and like know all of the like nooks and crannies of it and invest yourself in it, then I think you would honestly really enjoy this game. And for that reason, I'm going to add it to my essential games list. I think that it's not for everyone, but I think that there's a certain kind of person who, when they play NES games, they're looking for a game like this. And I think that it should be on more people's radar.
Very well said. Very interesting take, Sam. Joe, your take.
So I'll say I think that there are the bones of a good game here, but I don't think that they pulled it off. I think that like a lot of the things that you're describing, Sam, I also think are like really cool concepts for gameplay, and it's like a nice change up to things we've been used to, and it's cool ideas for game design. But I think that there's just too many things in it that frustrate me, like enemies that take 16 hits among a bunch of enemies that take one hit, that sometimes feel like you're just screwed when they appear, or the fact that I keep bringing up that you are really overpowered as Megagon. I just think that they didn't nail it. They didn't. I wish that there had been a sequel to this, because I think that would be something that they could look at, like, okay, what went wrong with Amagon and like what was right, and if they were to like really refine those things, I think you could make this into a good game. And if we were to do the old thought experiment that we do all the time of if you got this game in 1989. And it was like your only game, and you got really good at it, you probably would have fond memories of it. But I think the frustrations outweigh the pros for me, so I'm not putting it on.
Okay, Sean, where do you stand?
I can see that this game has some interesting ideas. I appreciate that the score is more than just something that gives you an extra life after 50,000 or whatever. The powering up does give you that power trip. But I think everything else about this game is just kind of strikes me as a little lazy. I don't really appreciate the core loop. I don't like the decisions they made in a lot of tiny ways. So yeah, I know that there are some people that this is their jam, but I don't think that I can put this on an essential games list. Maybe for an obscure cool list, but not an essential games list.
All right. So it can't be on the essential games list now that it's been at least tied. I will just say where I stand here is, it's there's a lot of work to playing this game. And I don't know about most people, but unless I'm playing like Harvest Moon, I don't like to work that much when I'm playing my video games. I like to just enjoy them. And I feel like, as I was talking about on the episode, there's a lot of pacing issues here. And just if I actually wanted to play this, like how I play video games, I can't. I'll die pretty quick. And it just wasn't overall like an enjoyable experience in that way. Seeing every single enemy and treating it like a life or death situation could be what they were going for. But it wasn't fun for me to play it that way. Every time I see a tree and I know that there's a bat dangling down from it, or I know that some enemies are going to fly in from the right side of the screen, it's like just being on edge like that didn't make for a fun game experience. And I'm not saying it was cheap, but it wasn't delivering on what I thought it was trying to do. So for that reason, it's not an essential game. But you gotta respect Sam.
I kind of knew it wasn't going to be, so it was more of a protest vote.
So you did the old Sean Top Gun.
Hell yeah,
Sure.
brother.
Yeah.
Free Top Gun.
But that's the show, like you gotta take your shot when you see a game that you like. You gotta call it out, and so this way, eventually, the show just becomes listeners who follow different people on the show. They're the followers of Joe, who only listen to his word of mouth and swear by Spy versus Spy.
Spy versus Spy, and what's the other one that I wanted on there? It's my.
You don't even know.
Zelda 2.
I know. I don't even know.
Zelda 2.
Well, Zelda 2,
Nah.
but that's not my Amagon.
Zelda 2, sure, but no, there is another
heck
one
is
that
it?
you wanted.
I don't know. Okay.
I'll find it. Keep going. I'll find it before the end of the episode.
Sure. I was just gonna say, then there's like that one listener who roots for me and says, I hope the other guys like stop picking on that dude. But they won't.
Where
the
are my
disciples of Sean.
slalom followers who have seen the
Rygar.
light?
Rygar?
I voted that on.
I love
believe.
Rygar.
Yeah.
I would put Rygar back
where
on this
were
list
you?
in a
Where were
heartbeat
you on the
now.
essential list?
I know. I'm sorry. I'll get back on there. I think Rygar is getting better with age.
Right.
I won't put
This
it
kind of gave me some Rygar vibes, like the colors or something, the look of it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. There are many games that we can go back and look on, but we have a lot of games to look forward to as well. Like next week's episode, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's, that's a famous novel, so it must
Sounds
translate
like a
well
classic.
into a video game.
Yeah. I can't
Yeah.
wait.
So we're going to look at that one, made by the Advanced Communication Company. And I think it's funny when I've never heard of a company before, like it's like, okay, cool, they made it, sure. And then we got a lot of other games coming up too, though. We've got Fist of the North Star, The Guardian Legend, Mappy Land. What do you think Mappy Land is? I think it's that game.
It's that hit cartography game.
Yeah. I think it's with those mice. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it was an arcade game.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to a mouse arcade game. Where's the Mousetrap NES game? Everybody wants that.
It broke after the first time you played it.
Did anyone ever play Mousetrap?
No, Mousetrap's the kind of game that you just set up, but you don't actually ever play it. You know, you just set it up and then watch the mouse get caught, and you're like, yay, it happened, and then you put it all back in the box.
Exactly how I played Mousetrap.
It's like Monopoly. You just put the houses on everything, but you don't play that game.
Right, yeah.
No, that's ridiculous. Anyway, for more ridiculous action, check out NostalgiaCast on Twitter, at NostalgiaCast, and we're posting ridiculous stuff all the time over there. Weird box arts, funny YouTube videos, interviews with me and Shigeru Miyamoto one day. Maybe. I could see that happening. Just keep listening, and maybe it will. Anyway, in the meantime, we're going to keep releasing episodes every Friday, so check back here. I'm Michael Esposito. You can find me at Esposito Film on Twitter, and I'll talk to you soon.